no trust. That's what one Iranian official tells our Fred Pleitgen about talks with the U.S. President Trump's hopes of a breakthrough with Iran in danger, as the Iranians aren't even happy with his chief negotiator, Steve Witkoff. Fred Pleitgen is out front in Tehran.
Death to America and death to Israel chants at Friday prayers in Tehran. The prayer leader laying into the Trump administration as the U.S.-Iran nuclear talks hang in the balance.
Iran's leadership is telling the United States that they want a nuclear agreement, but they're also not afraid of a confrontation if the talks fail.
Tehran not happy with both President Trump and his chief negotiator, Steve Witkoff, after Witkoff said the U.S. wouldn't allow Iran to continue enriching uranium as part of any deal. No way, there is no trust, this member of the elite Revolutionary Guard Corps tells me. They failed their previous tests towards the Iranian nation. However, we have initiated the talks to prove our intention is not war. We want the enrichment for medical and other purposes. The negotiations are unilateral, this woman says. Trump is trying to show his power, but it is our right to have nuclear capabilities. Iran has consistently said its nuclear program is purely civilian in nature, and Tehran insists on keeping its uranium enrichment capabilities. Iran's foreign minister acknowledging the talks are complicated. We stressed the positions and principles of the Islamic Republic of Iran regarding the negotiations, he says. Our positions are completely clear and we insist on them. I think the American side now has a better and more clear picture of our position. President Trump is threatening even tougher measures against Iran if the talks fail. And American officials tell CNN intelligence suggests Israel is preparing for strikes against targets in Iran. Iranians we spoke to vowing a tough response if that happens. The United States knows better what will happen, he says. If things get serious, there will not be a country named Israel on Earth. But for now, both sides say they're gearing up for the next round of talks, trying to forge a new nuclear deal.
And Erica, of course, the U.S. saying that progress continues to be made, but there is still work to be done. Of course, for the Iranians, that main sticking point remains uranium enrichment. That is something where they say it is their right, and they're not going to walk back from that. Erica?
Fred, appreciate the reporting tonight. Thank you.
Growing skepticism today after a fifth round of indirect nuclear talks with the United States and Iran in Rome. The U.S. insists Iran dismantle its uranium enrichment program, a crucial element to the manufacturing of nuclear weapons, while Iranian officials say that's a red line. CNN's Fred Pleitgen is in Iran's capital, Tehran. Fred, what's the mood there?
Hi there, Phil. Well, there is certainly a lot of skepticism here on the ground. At the same time, the Iranians are saying these talks are continuing, and as long as they continue, there is a chance for a positive outcome. But you're absolutely right. The Iranians today, after those talks, and this comes in the form of the foreign minister, who's also the lead negotiator for the Iranians, he came out and he said that the talks were very professional, as he put it. But it seems as though what was achieved, as far as the Iranians are concerned, is they say that the U.S. now better understands Iran's position than they did before. Now, it doesn't really sound like a lot of progress on the face of it. That's also the vibe that we're getting here on the streets of Tehran as well. We were at Friday prayers earlier today, and on the sidelines of those prayers, I spoke to a couple of people and got their view. Here's what they told me.
Our supreme leader says we don't want a nuclear weapon. We don't need one because our power lies in our belief in God.
I hope this round will be like previous rounds, and the common points of the parties will get closer so that both countries will benefit. But considering the differences that exist, a result seems a bit out of reach.
The negotiations are unilateral. Trump is trying to show his power. But it is our right to have nuclear capabilities. We don't want anything dangerous, just for medical purposes and agriculture.
Those are a couple of folks that we were speaking to earlier today on the sidelines of those Friday prayers. And that really is the main issue for the Iranians, and the one that they say is definitely the most difficult in those talks. And that is that enrichment by the Iranians. They say, first of all, they have a right to that. But they also say it's a technology that they've been working on for such a very long time, that homegrown enrichment capability. And it's not something that they're willing to give up. It's quite interesting to hear also from the U.S. side after those talks. We didn't hear directly from Steve Witkoff, but certainly a source close to Steve Witkoff saying that the U.S. also believes that progress continues to be made, but there are still a lot of factors that need to be worked on. So neither side saying they believe that there's going to be a breakthrough coming fast, but both sides at least saying they are going to meet again for the talks, not too distant future, Phil.
Fred Pleitgen for us in Tehran. Thanks so much. Joining us now, Brett McGurk. He was the special envoy under multiple presidents, National Security Council coordinator under President Biden. Brett, you were involved in Iran talks. I actually want to start with what Fred reported. Iranian officials were saying about the meeting, saying that the U.S. better understands the position than they did before. I understand that may seem innocuous to people. What do those words mean to you?
Well, Phil, look, this is one of the most complicated files in Washington, so I give Steve a lot of credit for taking this on. It's complicated issue-wise. It's about nuclear physics. It's about sanctions. It's complicated politically in both capitals. But look, President Trump put a deadline on these talks in March. We have to get a deal in 2 months, and we're at 2 months. And this now seems to just be being rope-a-doped. I've negotiated with the Iranians. I kind of see exactly what they're doing. Look, this issue this year is a critical year. Let me tell you why. 2 things. What's left of the Obama-era JCPOA, one provision in it that even the critics of that deal really like is called snapback. That means any member of that agreement, including the UK and France, can go to the UN Security Council and say all UN sanctions come back on Iran without having to have a vote in the Security Council. It's unilateral. That expires in October, and that is a key piece of leverage against the Iranians. The Iranians know that. And the Brits and the French have been pretty hardline on this. They said, we're ready to do that if we don't have a new deal. But that's going to expire later this year. Another point about this, Phil, I was in the Situation Room on October 1st last year, 200 ballistic missiles coming from Iran to Israel. Takes 13 minutes for that flight. And I kept thinking at that moment, if one of those missiles ever had an Iranian nuclear warhead, I don't care if it's 5 years, 20 years from now, just think about what could happen. I mean, this country, Iran, cannot be on the threshold of having a nuclear weapon. So this issue has to be dealt with. It can be dealt with militarily, as President Trump has threatened. It can be dealt with diplomatically. We want a diplomatic resolution. But as I see this going on, I just don't see this moving to a resolution. I mean, you're talking about more talks. I've seen this pattern before. I think the Iranians just want to kind of string this out.
But if the key kind of leverage point is the October snapback provisions from other JCPOA signatories, presumably that's kind of the window here. I know the president put a 2-month time limit on it. Is that kind of the reality? Like, we're going to go up to rope-a-dope until October, and then someone's going to make decisions?
This year is a critical issue. This coming months. I mean, snapback expires in October, but to really implement it, the Europeans would have to move later this summer. So the coming months are really critical here. I thought that deadline Trump put on back in March was right. Increasing sanctions pressure is right, although Iran is continuing to export significant amounts of oil. And military pressure. You have to have a credible military threat in the region to really put teeth on this. And also, the reason I was confident this year to actually get a pretty good deal, Iran is in the weakest position it has been in decades. The Israelis took out all of their strategic air defense back in October. Iran economically is in deep distress. It's lost Hezbollah's main proxies around the region. So like everything's lined up here for a deal. But the Iranians are very good at just stringing things out. Let's meet today in Rome for 2 hours. Let's meet again in 2 weeks in Oman. And before you know it, you just kind of run out of time.
I ask you, what you flash back to, which, by the way, people may not remember that because it went miraculously so well. Not miraculously. There was a reason why it went well. I know you're deeply involved in that. The U.S.-Israel relationship right now, there's a lot of reporting out about potential attacks, the relationship between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump. Sources telling CNN U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff was set to meet with Ron Dermer, confidant of Prime Minister Netanyahu, on the sidelines of these talks in Rome. Where does that relationship sit right now?
I think it's pretty solid. There's always tension in the relationship. I think it's pretty solid. But look, Israel is concerned about a deal that doesn't really take care of the problem. They're concerned about an interim deal that kind of kicks the can and then snapback expires. And so that's where you get a lot of this tension. Look, I think it's very good. Ron Dermer and David Barnea, the director of Mossad, someone I know very well, was also in Rome talking to Steve on the sidelines of these talks. I think that's good. End of the day, President Trump has a lot of power here because he's got political force in Washington to do a deal. There's only Bibi has limited maneuvering room with Trump. But you have to get a good deal. And I think to get a good deal on these issues, you know, everyone talks about enrichment. It's not just the enrichment program. It is, since Trump left the JCPOA in 2018, Iran has installed or produced new generations of centrifuges. You have to take care of the centrifuges, the stockpiles of highly enriched uranium. It is a very, very complicated set of issues. It takes weeks and months to negotiate, of constant negotiations. So I'm a little concerned here we're being strung along. And I think you got to put some teeth on this. Every negotiation has to have a deadline. And Trump said 2 months ago, it'll be 2 months. We're at that point. So we're now at the point where this can just get rope-a-doped. And I think you got to put a little teeth in here or we're not going to get a deal.